So before we dive into the session, I'd like to scope this up a little bit so we know exactly what we're in for till 7 p.m. or perhaps a little bit over that. This is part 2, but that's okay. If people were not here for part 1, it is not a prerequisite to benefit from the second part. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we've been speaking about the miracles of the Quran, or how to understand the Quran as a very unique text, unique to the point of divinely attribution. What is divine attribution? Is that the belief that the Quran, in its essence, does not have any human involvement. Yeah. So, for example, how did the Quran get transmitted? By human beings, obviously. Human beings transmitted the Quran from each generation, but that process is divine. Right? And for believers, this is a cornerstone of belief, to understand that the text that we're reading today is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ has read. Anybody reading the Maghrib Salah today is reading the Quran, and if the Prophet ﷺ was in attendance and he was listening to the recitation, he would not think that this is something else. He would know this is exactly what I came with, what was revealed upon me, and that's how I taught to the companions, because that's how the companions taught to the next generation and to the next generation. Why? Simply put, because the Quran is preserved in hordes. It's preserved mutawatiran. It's preserved in so many multiple attested streams of chains that there is a impossibility of someone who learned the Quran from even their parents, who learned from their parents, that they could have gotten it wrong. Because if someone had learned it incorrectly, they wouldn't have survived in adulthood, except that it would have been corrected. And it's happened, right? Sometimes we're doing something, for example, a step of wudu, or a particular way of reading, and someone says that's not how it's done, and they just correct us. And therefore, you can go to anywhere in the Muslim world, and you can attend any prayer that's happening around the Muslim world, and as long as it's mainstream Islam, you would not find a difference between this prayer and the prayer that's happening in every single masjid over here, right? So part of it, what we covered last time, I know it might not be very clear. Can we do something about the lights here in the front? So we don't want to shut everything off. Is it possible to just, does that work? Is that possible? Maybe the back, sister, if you can try. We don't want to make the whole thing dark. So like a theater then. Oh, perfect. Jazakallah khairan. This actually works. If that's okay with the guys here, is that okay? It's not too dark for your notes or anything. Right. So last time we came here, we spoke about the path of knowledge and the virtues of the Quran. We talked about the rights of the Quran upon the believer. We talked about the history and development of the Quranic sciences, some of like an academic historical route. We talked about the nature of and the reason for revelation. We talked about the different names of the Quran. And we spent the last bit talking about the structure of the Quran, right? And so what we want to do today is not any of that stuff, because we've already talked about it. This is all part of a different course, to be honest. It's an excerpt of a fully fledged out course. So what we're going to do today, inshallah ta'ala, and then as we scope this, we can go for our salah, is we're going to speak specifically about the content of the Quran, the actual content. Last time what we spoke about was more like structure, was more like, concepts about the Quran. Today we speak about the actual content of the Quran, right? How does the Quran put together ideas? And what is it trying to do? When it comes to da'wah, for someone who hasn't understood these sort of metrics of the Quran, what ends up happening is they talk about the Quran, but they're not talking from the perspective of the Quran. This is very important. What is the main difference between a seminary educated student versus someone who gets a PhD in Quranic studies from the university, from Orientalist literature? What is the main difference? The main difference is that the seminary student has tasted the Quran, the tafsir tradition, what the Quran is actually saying, versus someone who's talking about the Quran from an outsider's view, right? So for example, today we'll speak about the content of the Quran and its nature. What is the Quran actually saying? And how do we know it's saying this, right? And how can we show someone who perhaps not even a believer that this is worth studying and it's extremely powerful. We need this as believers, obviously. Everyone needs to be propelled to take the Quran more seriously, to actually engage in its meanings. Everyone needs this. But how can we convince someone who's not serious about this to say, hey, if you don't study this as a piece of literature, as a revealed document, let's just say you don't believe in the fact that it's divinely revealed. Let's just assume that you don't believe that. It's still very monumental to you. And this is how. Can we have that conversation with an individual to show them can we get someone to appreciate the Quran and see its wisdom in a mere conversation? And if we can do that, there's nothing that is a greater tool of da'wah than the Quran. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ did not have a da'wah handbook. He didn't. A lot of us, when we study some of the da'wah courses, what the training session does is like, if the person is like this, you use these mechanisms or these strategies, trying to train you on a protocol. What was the official protocol of the Prophet ﷺ on how to give da'wah? The text of the Quran. It was literally this. And somehow along the way, we felt that we have to do something else. We have to add this component and that component and this, and that's how we get to it. Because we assume that it is through intellectual, rational proofs that you get someone to believe in Islam. This is what we've assumed. So we're talking to someone, we're trying to say, how can I convince them rationally that Islam is true? Whereas that's not actually what the Prophet was doing. He was getting people to taste the Qur'an. And if they tasted the Qur'an, they would know that that is not from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it will revive their fitrah. And as long as their fitrah is revived, they don't need anything else. People don't need an elaborate rational proof. Some people do. Majority of the people don't need that. People don't need this, particular wisdom or evidence or this evidence or that. They don't need this. Majority of the people. Ask yourself of people in your circle that have converted to Islam. And if you know them really well and that you've befriended them, ask them, what was it? And I guarantee you, in those conversations, it's not just one evidence. Oh, I heard this evidence, and after that I was like, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. This is not what happens. It's a journey. It's a bunch of things acting up. And a lot of it is sparked through just genuine conversations. It's about people around them being really normal Muslims. Majority of it is just interactions. It's someone just being prophetic in their lives and showing that this is what Islam requires. And then in conversation, there hasn't been a more powerful way of giving da'wah than to get people closer to the Quran and let the Quran do the conversions. None of us are converting anybody, right? We all need to be converted, right? None of us are actually going around and telling everyone, hey, this is, if you believe in this. It's not how it works. So part of it is to get a taste of that. And number two, we're going to look at specifically speaking to our Catholic and Christian brothers and sisters and how the Quran is engaging with the biblical text. Just because in terms of da'wah, one of the groups that is extremely interested in the Quran are the Christians. Whether it's to demonize it, whether it's to show that it's from the devil, right? Or whether to sincerely get to it and say, look, we need to have a conversation about this text. This is very intriguing. These are a group of people who believe in Christ, but not really, right? So what is actually going on there? There's a lot of interest. And if you've been in the da'wah field, you know that the closest people to actually having important discussions with are the Christians in this sense. So that's what we're going to be doing today, inshallah ta'ala. I don't know if we'll actually finish, given the fact that it is 5:15, we have to do Maghrib. So I will try and go through as much content here as possible. I have handpicked passages that I believe as believers, they will increase our iman, and as da'is, they will give us very powerful content for us to discuss with other people. So those are the two things I kept in mind here, right? Because this is a da'wah event. It's important for us to not just do like a spiritual study of these things, because then it would turn into a halaqah. We don't want that, although that's great. Okay, but we also want to be able to see, okay, how can I use this in conversation with somebody else to highlight the supremacy of the Quran over all ideologies? How do I do that functionally? Okay, so with that being said, inshallah ta'ala, I think we break for Maghrib. We'll be back in about 10 minutes, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. So first, we're looking at the content of the Quran and its nature, specifically from a perspective of da'wah. And secondly, we're going to be looking at how the Quran is dealing with biblical narratives and how it addresses some of those things. And again, specifically from a realm of da'wah. So today's seminar is going to be very fixated on using the Quran as da'wah material, right? And how to do that. In the introduction, I told you that the Prophet ﷺ's primary da'wah guide was just two things. Number one, his character, which he had been building from before he became a prophet. And number two was the Quran, right? And so for you and I, our first toolkit to speak to perhaps Muslims who perhaps might not be very serious with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or with non-Muslims, the first thing is our character, right? Because that's what it was for the Prophet ﷺ as well. So if we've been there for people, like the Prophet had been there for the Quraysh, for his tribe, for other tribal members, and then you speak the word of truth with the eloquence that the Quran provides, and of course that means you have to up your eloquence game in English. This is really important. And I don't know why nobody talks about this. Like when you attend da'wah seminars, how many people here have attended a da'wah seminar in which the da'i who's standing in front of you has told you that in order to be a good da'i, you have to master the English language? Raise your hand if the person giving the seminar told you that you need to learn rhetoric, you need to learn idioms, you need to learn rhetorical devices in the English language. Raise your hand. Okay, what have I told you that the Quran makes this a point? The Quran makes this a point, that the Quran is revealed بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ, in clear conveyance of the Arabic language. And the Quran tells us that Allah doesn't send prophets and messengers to their communities except they speak in the language of their people. So there are riwayat on this, where the Sahaba say things like, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أفصح منا لسانا, that the Prophet was the most eloquent from amongst all of us in terms of his speech, right? And there's an authentic riwayah too, that أُوتِيتُ مِنْ جَوَامِعَ الْكَلِمِ, I was given from brevity in speech, meaning I would speak a little, but it would mean a lot. What is that? That is the ability to talk to someone and then they hear something and they know what they've heard is profound. They might not have thought about it too much. This is the Quran's complaint with the Quraysh. You're not doing tadabbur of the Quran. Because if you did tadabbur of the Quran, it will unlock things that are shackled up and locked up in your heart. But you're not doing enough tadabbur. Like, do more tadabbur. Yes? So we're going to explore some of these things, inshallah ta'ala. A lot of this stuff, if you've heard my talks or lessons before, you've definitely heard this. This is really important. First thing is Mecca and Medina verses. So I'll talk to you in the term in the context of da'wah, why this is important. Okay? Now we're learning practical da'wah lessons from just pure usul al-tafsir and ulum al-Quran. Meccan verses are different from Medinan verses. They're very different. One of the reasons they're very different is because your audience is different. So the first thing that we're learning about da'wah is that we have to diversify how we speak because we are in a different location. So if you're in a masjid, your Jummah khutbah is very different. If you're at a campus, at the university, your Jummah khutbah is very different. If you're giving a reminder to your best friend and you're driving in a car, you shouldn't be giving a Jummah khutbah, right? Your tone of voice is different, the way you're approaching the things are different, right? And if you're speaking to a non-Muslim who happens to be Christian, your da'wah is different, right? So when, for example, Ja'far, the hadith of Musnad Imam Ahmad, when Ja'far and the Muslims from Mecca who migrate to Abyssinia, when they go there, which surah do they recite? Maryam, right? It's kind of sort of out there if they had recited, for example, Surah, which is an early Meccan surah that was only relevant to the Quraysh and no one else, like Surah Al-Fil. Surah Al-Fil is a very Quraysh relevant surah. It's how Allah protected the Kaaba from the army of the elephants. The Quraysh knew this incident. They had heard about this. Some of them alive at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when this revelation came, witnessed that event. It was very relevant to the Quraysh. It would be an interesting thing if Ja'far said Surah Al-Quraysh, he recited Surah Al-Quraysh in front of the Najashi and his cabinet. Do you understand what we mean? So knowing which part of the Quran to present to who for a particular effect is really important da'wah technique. So what do most people do? Most people are victims to what's called the availability bias. I'm going to show you availability bias today in these slides, that I'm a victim to it too. which means stuff that I've been reading and researching and studying with my teachers. Those are the kind of things that I will come and talk about. This is probably not the best way of doing da'wah. The best way of doing da'wah is not from your perspective. It's from what the person wants to hear. What will be beneficial for the people you're speaking to, not perhaps what you recently have covered. Availability bias is a very serious thing. What's your favorite surah? The surah that you've recently memorized, the surah that you've recently been studying, right? Does that mean that that surah is relevant to the person you're speaking to? Is that 100% the case? If someone says, all of Qur'an is miracle, brother, yeah, that's true, but not everything is not replaceable by other things. What this person needs to hear, you have to figure that out. In the first 2 to 3 minutes of your conversation with someone, you have to figure out from which angle, which door of the Qur'an am I opening and leading them through. Going to open some random door, or am I going to open a particular door that will be more relevant for this person? Okay. Meccan Qur'an tends to be short bursts of eloquence, and Medinan Qur'an happens to have longer and more elaborate verses, right? So if you need some power verses, very powerful verses, short verses, can you think of some Meccan verse, a verse, single one, don't give me a list, a single verse where you feel to me, that's a really powerful verse? Just a short Meccan verse. Can you think of one? Think. For you, I'm not talking about when you're going to use it in a da'wah setting for someone else. So for you, short, particular verse, it's like, whoa, that just hits differently. For a lot of people, it's verses like, Inna ma'al usri yusra. Isn't it? So that's a very powerful verse, right? Alongside with difficulty, there's always ease. It's a very powerful verse. You can write books on this, right? Or فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, one of my favorite verses. فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, where are you headed? Where do you think you're going? Allah's asking us, where are you going? Right? What's going on? Ya ayyuhan nas, ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem. O mankind, what is distracting you from returning to your noble master? What is it that's distracting you? You want to list it out? You see, small, short, powerful verses. If you sneak them into a conversation, then you let the Qur'an do the da'wah. You're not really doing the da'wah. If you can learn those verses, can you imagine how powerful your da'wah becomes? Just speaking to people and talking to their fitrah. Because you know the Qur'an doesn't talk to the heart or the intellect. It talks to the fitrah. And the fitrah then channels it either to the intellect or to the heart. So da'wah with the Qur'an is not, you're not giving da'wah to that individual. You're giving da'wah to what's inside of them that wants to connect with the Qur'an. You just assume that this person is hungry for the Qur'an. That's how you approach anyone, everyone, even if the person is being vile. You approach them as if this person is really hungry for the Qur'an. I just got to find the right meal for them, right? Like our job is the chef. Just got to find the right meal. And once I present it, it's going to talk to their fitrah because the fitrah is hungry for this. And that's the assumption. What about Medinan Qur'an? Medinan Qur'an is inclusive of laws, about just society. There are people that we're talking to that are very ethically minded. They're very prone to having discussions about what is right, what is ethical, what is moral. A lot of those verses are in Medinan ayat. For example, Surah Al-Hujurat. And I believe that, is it this campus? There's a campus right now, they're doing a seminar. Waterloo is doing something with Surah Al-Hujurat, right? So it's the idea of just learning what to use when and to which context. Meccan Quran primarily focuses on faith and ethics, right? Works really well with people who don't have faith and ethics, right? Whereas Medinan Quran continues the discussion and adds its legal aspects of the prophetic constitution. A lot of communication with the Jews and the Christians in Medinan Quran. If you're talking to someone from a Jewish and Christian background, you speak to them. The way that Allah presents Judaism and Christianity in Medinan Quran is really profound. Really profound. It's like absolutely talking about their theological manuals and talking about developments in their creed and commenting on them, right? Meccan Quran is filled with narratives of the past where the saga of the messengers is mentioned. And Medinan Quran mentioned these at times passingly to make an argument. So detailed stories of prophets, Meccan Quran. Snippets and summaries of those stories, Medinan Qurans. So for example, if you have a long time with someone, a few years ago, I was on a plane ride with a sister who's Christian, and she's just sitting. She's like a mother of three, in her maybe late 40s, and she was like a super church lady, right? And we're at a 3.5 hour flight to Atlanta, so it was, needless to say, it was a fun discussion, and we had time, and so I asked her, and I always do this with Christians, can you share with me your favorite passage of the Bible, right? Because the first thing you want to do is build rapport, and you want to be a good listener, right? And because you know what happens when you start doing that, the other person don't have a choice but to ask you the same question. They don't have a choice. If they're a decent human being and you say, can you tell me your favorite passage of the Bible, and you talked about it for like a bit, what do you think they're going to ask you next? Can you share something from the Quran? It's like, all right, that's what I actually wanted to do, right? And so we had time, and so we spoke in detail about the role of Maryam alayhi salam in the Quran. I told her, I was just blessed with a daughter. My daughter's middle name is Maryam, and she's named after Mary. And we had this long discussion about how she said she has three aunts, all their names are Mary. And we start talking about who Maryam is in the Quran. And our job is not just check. I didn't check after 3 hours. So are you gonna take the shahada now, right? Isn't it time? It's not that, but it's the idea is that you've planted those seeds, right? And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, it goes somewhere. So Meccan verses tend to be the sajda verses, so they're the powerful verses that force someone to get into the sajda. Medinan verses are in line with prophetic happenings, so there's a lot of heavy seerah, right? So when you're talking about the life of the Prophet, a lot of it is captured in Medinan Quran and not perhaps the Meccan Quran. It also talks about the battles. So one of the things that inshallah ta'ala, maybe we can bring it up when we do our QA, is that for people who fixate on the fact that Islam is barbaric or it's very violent, how does the Quran, broach this subject? How does it speak about it? Why does it speak about those verses? Where are those verses located? We can get into that. And we spoke about this last time I was here. I'm going to quickly skip through this stuff. Okay. Let's get into stories. So for me, in my conversations, in dawah work, one of the most powerful things that you can get people to look at are Quranic stories. And it's very less, it's not very popular, dawah of the Quran through Quranic stories. And recently, this has been a phenomenon now because of a few, and it doesn't take me any pride to say this, non-Muslim Orientalists who started looking at the Quran from a literature perspective. So they opened a door to a genre that from many, many Muslims didn't exist. That doesn't mean our Mufassirun didn't talk about it. They talked about it, but not as a genre. For example, what do I mean by a genre? There's a genre of the oaths of the Quran. You can find books just on oaths of the Quran. There are books. There's a genre of the examples or the analogies of the Quran. You can find entire books on this. There's a genre of this, that, or the other. When it comes to Quran how Allah is as a storyteller, you have, for example, stories of the Quran, but they're like history books. It's like compilation of all the story of Salih in one place. You go through the entire Quran, you grab everything to do with Nuh, you put it in one place. You find all the hadith about Nuh, you put it in one place. My very famous Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, in his Bidaya wa Nihaya, has an entire volume on the prophets and the stories of the prophets. That's not the Quran as literature. This is a very new phenomenon. So I want to expose this to you, is show you some of the potency and power of this. Okay? First of all, what are the 3 T's of a classic story? Like a classic story. What does a story need to have? It's supposed to transport you, supposed to uproot you from where you are to wherever the story wants you to be. So you feel like you're part of the plot. It's timeless, meaning the lessons and the notions and the motifs in the story are relevant today. Very much like why after 400 years, every high school student and university student who's majoring in English is studying Shakespeare. Because is jealousy not relevant today? Is pride not relevant today? Is lust not relevant today? These things are timeless. Then it's transformational, meaning after you are done reviewing or learning that story, you are not the same person anymore. If these 3 things exist, if you contemplate on a story and this happens to you, then this is considered a classic. Right? Every year, by the way, there are conferences that happen to check if this particular novel is a classic or not. And it gets entered into the Hall of Fame of Classics, right? So the first thing to ask is, why are there stories in the Quran? Why are there stories in the Quran? This is very important. Firstly, because stories are memorable and quotes merely are not. Prose and poetry is much more difficult to retain than stories are. And this is why all of the things that you guys know about, all the major instances in your life, you've stored in your memory as stories. In your own life, things of the past, you store them as stories, as narratives, right? They create archetypes, which means you can see yourself in stories. Instead of telling someone, be patient, which Allah obviously does, He can actually show you what it means to be patient through the story of Nuh. He could actually show you what it means to be patient in the story of Yusuf. He can show you what it means to be patient in the story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So stories create archetypes. Instead of saying, hey, don't think that power can't corrupt you. Instead of saying that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach us about Fir'aun. And He'll talk about how deluded someone can get when they have access to power, right? Stories do mirroring, which is sometimes a story can show you who you are. A story can show you who you are that even a mirror that you're staring at will not show you. And this is why Fakhruddin al-Razi, in his tafsir, he says that the true tadabbur reader of the Quran sees himself in the narratives of the Quran. Like you see yourself, not Adam alayhi salam. In the Adam alayhi salam story, you see yourself falling short as well and eating from the tree. Your eating from the tree could be your sin, right? That bears its consequences. And we're going to do some examples of that today. The nature of the repetition of the stories of the Quran. So why, and one other aspect of the Quran repeats the stories. Why does it do that? Then Quranic connectivity to biblical forgeries, which we're going to discuss today. So these are the three things that we're going to do today, inshallah ta'ala. If you have any questions in the middle, you can always raise your hands and ask. Okay? But the paradigm that I want to take today are specifically stories and how to do da'wah through these stories. Okay? Because we have limited time. If we just like open the scope for this thing, we will be here for a long time. Okay? Okay, let's get into this. Quranic stories are, firstly, not all the stories are mentioned. Allah actually tells us that we mention some of the stories to you, we don't mention others. So why? Why don't we have other stories? Now, please understand, and the Mufassirun have commented on this verse saying this exact thing that I'm going to tell you. There is perhaps a possibility that there are other stories of prophets that we don't know about that are more entertaining. By entertaining means they have really interesting miracles or some really interesting things, adventures that are taking place. We have no idea about these stories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't tell us because entertainment is not one of the criterion by which these stories are being told. And this is the problem that we do. When we go to the stories, we're looking for the entertainment factor or the adventure factor or the likability of the story factor. What makes the story likable, right? That's not the case of the Quran. It doesn't do that. So why does it tell us these stories? On what grounds? If it's not entertainment. Yes.
I'm just going to copy what you told us the answer is. Okay?
Yes, yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the stories in the Quran that are relevant to Hidayah. That which is necessary for our Hidayah.
That's correct. So the only metric by which a story is being told to us is that it's for guidance, which means at the end of reading a story, if you're not thinking to yourself, what are the 10 learning points, 12 learning points, 15 learning points? If we're not doing that, we've missed the point. This is why, can you tell me in the Quran, I'm telling you in the Quran, can you tell me any of the names of Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers? There's a whole surah called Surah Yusuf, surah number 12 in the Quran, right? It's like 110 verses, right? 10, 12 pages long. And the whole surah is about Yusuf and his brothers. What is the name of Yusuf's brothers in the Quran? What about the brother that he keeps with him? What's his name in the Quran? What do you think? What's his name? Yes. Is that in the Quran? You're right. Benjamin is his name in biblical sources. The Tabi'un called him Binyamin. Yes, you're right. But I'm telling you, did the Quran want us to know his name? Why not just tell us? Tell us their names. Okay, how old is everyone? In any story. Any story. You guys, famous stories of old people having children in their old age. How old are they? Like how old is Zakaria when he had Yahya? How old is Ibrahim when he had Isaac? Did the Quran tell us their ages? Odd, isn't it? You're telling us an old person is going to have a child. Tell us how old he is. The Quran describes his oldness. وَاشْتَأَلَ الرَّأْسُ شَيْبًا. Right? وَحَنَ الْعَظْمُ مِنِّي. His bones are weak. His hair is flamed gray. It's burning gray. But we don't know how old he is. Why not just tell us? It's like he was 92 years old. He was 86. These are all opinions in tafsir. 92, 86, they're opinions. But why not just tell us? Why doesn't Allah tell us this? Okay, what about the names of important people, like really important people? So who's a really important person in the Quran? A really important person in the Quran are the people who are alongside the Prophet ﷺ who are mentioned again and again and again and again. For example, Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is mentioned in the Quran, but not his name. Because Allah mentions about when the two of you were in the cave, right? ثاني اثنين إذ هما في الغار. We know who Allah is talking about. Why not just tell us Abu Bakr? Why just say, oh, one of the two in the cave said? Why did you say Abu Bakr said? Thoughts? Try someone else. Yeah?
The point of those stories is not who was in it, it's the point of what they were, the situation they were in.
Okay, very good, because the point of it is the situation. But he's mentioning them, and he's not mentioning their names. He's mentioning them. He says, Sahibihi. Yes?
Maybe to build a strong archetype so we can see ourselves.
Very good. That's the whole point. It's to build those archetypes. And as soon as it said, oh, this person said this, that person said this, then we think it's historic, which is exactly what we do with the other names that are there. We think it's history stories. We don't see Nuh inside of us. We don't see the son of Nuh inside of us. We don't see it because we think it's some history lesson. Like, you just know it as trivia. So that one day when you're doing like Islam trivia, you can get these questions right. What do they call the missed people? What do they call that? The missed ball. Yeah, you can win the missed ball because you know all these facts about things, right? So there's been recent interest in the academy on Quranic stories. This is new, and as I told you, a lot of the impetus on this stuff is actually coming from Muslim scholars, like faith-based scholars, but from who are practicing Islam. Like, these are people who are practicing Islam, but they're not in the Islamic milieu. And a lot of it is, now you can say from a qadr perspective, this is good. Another genre of Islam has been uncovered by people who grew up with a different way of thinking about text and looking at Quran as literature. And we're going to get some insights in this. So Quran as literature is what we're going to explore, inshallah ta'ala. This is a different dimension in Quranic stories. So sometimes the Quran tells us something from Allah's perspective. No other human being can tell you a story like this, right? It'll tell us what's going on inside the person's heart. No human being can tell you a story in which they can accurately depict what's happening inside someone's heart. What are they thinking about? Like, for example, Allah tells us that Walid ibn Mughira, when he first was dealing with the Islam problem in Mecca, he's one of the chieftains, he's dealing with the Islam problem. In his home, he was pacing right and left. Right? This is Surah Al-Alaq. In his home, he was pacing. And he was thinking, how do I bring this thing down? And he wasn't able to come up with an answer. He was frustrated. And so Allah captures his inner emotions in the Quran. Now, this is impossible for anyone to have historically grabbed. Narrations with regards to Quranic stories and embellishments, we'll talk about that, inshallah ta'ala. And let's start with our first story. Okay, so this is a very important passage, right? Have we done this in Quill yet? No, okay. So this is an important passage. So for those of you who want references or English, because I can't squeeze the English and the Arabic on this, otherwise, like, you can't see it, the font becomes too small. So I chose just to put the Arabic, and if whatever I'm trying to highlight, I'll use the laser pointer on it, okay? And it also will give you an impetus for everyone to learn Arabic, right? I hold a very rare position in academia, which is that Arabic is not the language of the Arabs. Arabic should be the mainstream language of Muslims. So regardless of your age, Quranic Arabic is something which is an impetus for everybody to learn. Okay, again, this is not mainstream opinion. This is a very shadh view. So it's not mainstream view, but I'm just letting you know that some of my teachers held this view. This is the official view of Sayyidina Umar, by the way. For those of you who don't know, it's the official view of Imam Malik. For those of you who don't know, so this was a salient view from many people of greatness. And I think, practically speaking, Islam and history actually implemented this. It did, right? Because anyone from Egypt speaks Arabic. They never spoke Arabic at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Everyone from Syria speaks Arabic today. They didn't speak Arabic at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Everyone in Iraq speaks Arabic today. They didn't speak Arabic at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So early Muslims understood that Arabic is not a language for Arabs, it's a language for Muslims, right? And we need to sort of revive that. Again, I don't think how successful that would be now, but it's worth a shot. So in Surah As-Sad, verse number 29 to 40, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us a very strange incident. So this is a Quranic narrative, it's a story, right? I'm going to ask you, what is the famous dua of Sulaiman that you all know? Famous dua of Sulaiman Islam that we all know. Yes. Oh, very good. Grant me a kingdom that you will not grant to anyone after me. Okay, so I'm just saying it like that, just the way, just that, okay? I'm going to say it again to you. A prophet of God is saying to Allah, Allah, grant me a kingdom that you will not grant to anyone after me. Is this a prophetically, this is like a spiritual dua? Like, does this sound befitting for a prophet of Allah to ask for this? Just from the way that it sounds, yes. So is he saying to not grant the kingdom to them?
Yes.
Okay. So when he says, don't grant a kingdom as great as mine to anyone else, what does he mean by this? Yes. It was very taxing for him. Where did you get that explanation from? No, this is a good, she's right. Where'd you get it from? It's not in tafsir. It's not. It's just one guy saying this. Yeah, this is just Razi saying this. The reason I want to highlight this is because look at this. What happens here is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this passage. Now, I want to show you why he's telling us this story, remember? And why it's important for da'wah. Why would Allah tell us this story about Sulaiman? I'm sure, you guys, Sulaiman spoke to animals. Wouldn't there be like really interesting stories that have happened in his life? He had control over jinns. Wouldn't there be really interesting stories, things that he made the jinns do? Conversations he had with jinns? Wouldn't it be nice to know that stuff? Yeah, maybe for entertainment. But that's not what this passage is doing. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? He first introduces us to the Qur'an. And he says, Qur'an is a book. Anzalnahu, we revealed it, ilayka, to you, Mubarak. Right? So the little bit of Qur'an that you get, because now we're going to learn Mubarak in the context of this passage, right? What is this passage? Just 10 verses. This is just 10 verses. But if the 10 verses are Mubarak, what does that mean? Bariku shay, when something has barakah in it, what does that mean? A little bit gives a lot. So these 10, so Allah prefaces this story by saying, hey, this is Mubarak, which means just don't think it's just 10 verses. It's like 10 volumes because it's Mubarak, because that's the nature of the Quran. Then it says, li yadabbaru, so that people can contemplate its verses. Did he say so that people can read? Li yatlu, so people can read it? No, he says so people can contemplate its verses, which means mere reading of the Quran isn't even what the Quran is demanding from us. Allah is telling us we sent this book down so you can think through it. Tadabbur, dubur means the back of something, right? So you know in English we say, I know this front and back. What are we trying to say when we say, I know this front and back? We know it really well. We know it thoroughly. So when the Quran is telling us that the Quran was sent down for tadabbur, what it's saying is that it's sent so that you can peer through it. That's what we're supposed to do. Ayatihi waliyadhakkara ulul albab. And the people of true intellect, the people of essence, they discuss them and they remind each other of these verses. So what does Allah say? وَوَهَبْنَا لِدَاوُدَ سُلَيْمَانَ. We blessed Dawood with Sulaiman. We gifted Dawood Sulaiman. This is the term Allah uses for children in the Quran. A gift. Yes? And he says, ni'mal abd. What an amazing slave he was. Innahu awwab. He was always turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Awwab is someone, you know tawab and awwab. You've heard tawab before? So one of Allah's names is at-tawab. Like you've heard of tawbah before? Right? This is inaba. It's different. It's awabiyah. It's different. Tawbah is when you're going in a particular direction, right? And then you sort of lose your way. So you have to do taba shay ala shay. You have to return back to where you're supposed to be going. It's a correction. It's when the GPS says, take a U-turn, right? That's what tawbah is. You've gone the wrong way, you got to reorient. Yeah? Awab is not tawab. Awab is someone who refuses to turn away. Like they're on the Sirat al-Mustaqim and they're getting distractions from right and left, but they refuse to turn to the distractions. So in awab, if you're in a state of awabiyah, you don't have to do tawbah because you're always focused. You don't get distracted. That's how Allah introduces Sulaiman alayhi salam to us. Always connected to Allah. Then he talks about one day, Eve, on a particular occasion. So this is the beginning of a story, right? The Eve is like udhkur, the Mufassirun say. Like, Ya Rasulullah, remind them of a particular day. عُرِضَ عَلَيْهِ بِالْعَشِيِّ الصَّافِنَةُ الْجِيَادِ. That one day, war horses were paraded at the end of the day. So bil-ashiyi, at the end of the day, war horses were paraded in front of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Right? فَقَالَ, and he says, إِنِّي أَحْبَبْتُ حُبَّ الْخَيْرِ. Allah has instilled in me the love of khair. Now, khair can mean good things. It can also mean horses, by the way. The Arabs would call horses khair because for them, they were like really, really blessed ni'am of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, Allah has blessed me with love of these great beasts, these ni'am, all this goodness that is surrounding me. He says, an dhikri rabbi. So this is a big issue in tafsir. Vast majority of the mufassirun, they say an dhikri rabbi means all this good stuff distracts me from Allah, takes me away from Allah, right? A few people, Ibn Ashur, Razi and others, they say no, an dhikri rabbi, this an here has the meaning of not distracts me away from Allah, but it brings me to Allah's remembrance. So what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me and you? That when you are blessed with good things, you can use those good things either two ways. Either to distract yourself from Allah or to build, you connect yourself to Allah. So for example, I'm not saying this, the scholars say this, okay? What's the most difficult Fajr prayer to ever pray? What do you think is the most difficult Fajr prayer to pray? Yes?
Excellent.
Is that a trick question? Not everything is a trick question. Right? It's like someone asked, I think it was Zuhri, they asked Zuhri, no, Ibn Shihab. What's the Qadi? Shuraih. They asked Shuraih. The Qur'an says that Iblis has dhurriya, children. He says, who did he marry? And he says to him, he says, that is one wedding I wasn't invited to. How would I know his wife? I wasn't invited to that wedding, right? So not everything is a trick question. They say that the Fajr, the day after your marriage, is one of the most difficult Fajrs to pray because you're distracted, you're occupied. They say the Fajr, the day that you've buried a family member because you're not psychologically in a regular state, right? And they say the Fajr of travelers, people traveling, they're exhausted. Now, not anymore if you're traveling in airplanes and fancy cars and things like that, but it would have been a very difficult thing to travel, right? And the exhaustion to sleep through Fajr would have been easy. So that's why they highlight this. So, حتى توارت بالحجاب. Yes? So it says, until these war horses, they disappeared into obscurity. So the horses were paraded in front of him until the horses disappear. Vast majority of the Mufassirun, they interpret this as until not the war horses disappeared, until the sun disappeared. What does it mean the sun disappeared? Sunset. So he's missed the Asr prayer. That's how they interpret this. They interpret this verse. So two ways of looking at this verse. First way is that Sulaiman alayhi salam, was so caught up with the horses that he missed the Asr prayer. Yes? And you'll see this in Qur'an.com when you open up translations, you'll see it. You'll see it. Like some of the translators are using this translation. And other translators are using Razi's view, which is, no, what happened was that he was admiring these war horses until the horses were no longer, they couldn't be seen, right? Tawarat bil hijab. They went over the view of sight. So what does he do? Rudduha alayya. He says, bring the horses back to me. Bring the horses back to me. And what does he do? فَطَفِقَ مَسْحًا بِالسُّوقِ وَالْأَعْنَاقِ. And he starts petting them at their neck and on their thighs. Why is he petting horses? Who pets horses? Whose job it is to take care of horses, brush them, and pet them? What do we call them? Horse groomers, stable boys. Yeah, he's becoming a stable boy. He is the king/prophet of his time. And what is he doing? He's taking care of horses. So what's the extraction point here for us? No matter how busy you get or how excelled you are in your dignity, in your honor, in your grace, the little things that you do to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you shouldn't neglect those little things, right? You see this with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taking care of animals, petting animals, standing up for when an animal has more load on it than it needs to have, right? Why? He's a statesman. He's a prophet of God. He's got a full schedule every day. The to-do list is heavy. Why is he doing this? Because this is Islam. It's prophetic to do this. Sulaiman is doing the same thing. He is so admiring this blessing that he has. He says, one way to do shukr of your blessings, one way is to feel them. The other way is to articulate them. The third way is to use your blessings for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To physically be involved in those blessings. Right? So he starts petting these horses. Of course, the traditional view on this, pre-Razi, would have been that he slaughtered all of these horses. Right? And why did he slaughter all these horses? Because they made him miss the Asr prayer. Okay? So that's, you'll find this in the translation as well. Yes, sir.
So is the view after Razi that like they did not miss Asr prayer?
So after Razi, because he's so influential, and Mafatih al-Ghaib became like a mainstream tafsir book that every later mufassir sort of relies on, both these opinions started being mentioned, and now almost all major authors prefer Razi's view over others' view.
He didn't miss the prayer.
No, it has nothing to do with missing prayer. Yes? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا سُلَيْمَانَ وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيهِ جَسَدًا ثُمَّ أَنَابَ. Then Allah says, we had severely tested Sulaiman. We tested Sulaiman severely. And وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِيهِ جَسَدًا. And we threw on his throne a mere corpse. Right? ثُمَّ أَنَابَ. And then he called on to his Lord in repentance. So what's happened here? We've just seen a day in Sulaiman's life, one day. You see that is? It says, remember when this happened. It's talking about one day. One day, at the end of the day, bil ashiyi, Sulaiman a.s. was just checking his war horses, his infantry of war horses, his inventory. And as these horses pass by, he can't just leave them and go. He is so in love with these horses and is so in awe of Allah's gift to him. He goes there, becomes a stable boy, and then he retires for the night. And when he retires for the night, he is a mere corpse. What does it mean he's a mere corpse? What does that mean? Extremely exhausted. Right? Remember, Allah is only telling what happened at the end of the day, bil ashihi. So he retires to his throne as a mere corpse. And then he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what are you supposed to do at the end of the day if you're a prophet of God? When you're done with all of your preoccupations. فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ وَإِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَارْغَب. Allah is commanding the Prophet that when you are done with all of your daily chores, all of your tasks, your mission as a prophet, as a statesman, as a husband, as a companion to others, when you're done all of that, then return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in sincerity. Right? So this is what he's doing. Every prophet had the same agenda. So he says to Allah in this context, because remember, he is a prophet and he's a king. He says to Allah, Rabbi ghfirli, oh Allah, forgive me. Because why? Does he have energy to now pray? Does he have energy to do anything substantial for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do you think? Does he feel very energized at the end of the day after having the day that he's had? And Allah describing a snippet from his day? You guys, petting horses was probably the last of the thing of priorities that Sulaiman the Great was involved in, correct? And after mentioning his day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he retired in the night. He says, Rabbi ighfirli wa habli mulkan. Oh Allah, forgive me and bless me with a kingdom. La yanbaghi li ahadin min ba'di. That no one after me can possess. That no one after me can have. Why? Because he is a prophet and he is a king. And he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for resources that are befitting a prophet king. And what are resources of a prophet king? The next verses tell us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjugated the wind under him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjugated the jinns under him. And why does he saying, don't give this to anyone after me? Because he knows the responsibility of this. Exactly the same type of thing that we talked about in the leadership seminar recently with Sayyidina Umar. When Sayyidina Umar at this deathbed was about to pass away, they said, the best person to be the Khalifa after you is going to be your son, Abdullah. What does Sayyidina Umar say? One person from the children of Khattab is enough to bear this burden. I don't want my son doing this. You see, he's saying that this is not like a perk. People shouldn't go through this. This is a lot to juggle, to take care of, the responsibility, the accountability of someone who's a prophet, but also a king. What is the accountability of a prophet? It's huge. The Prophet felt it, right? He would feel it. The Qur'an talks about it. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعُ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا تُؤْمِنُوا. Are you going to destroy yourself because they're not believing in you? He felt the responsibility of being a prophet. Now, can you imagine being a prophet and also being a king? So he says, no one after me, Ya Allah. This is it. This ends here, right? And it did end there. In the Bani Israeli history, there's no one who also after Sulaiman was a prophet or a king. This dua was accepted. It's just people think it's talking about something else. It's talking about him wanting the dunya and the glory of having all these powers over people. Yes, ma'am. They wouldn't talk about the dunyawi component of this, right? They would talk about he's asking for a kingdom that no one had after him for the sake of outdoing everyone in da'wah, because he's able to spread Islam like no one will be able to after him. But what I'm saying is that the prophets don't do this. No prophet does this. They're not saying, Ya Allah, make me better than those other people that could ever be out there. Like, there's no dua like this. You find the opposite with Anbiya, don't you? Right? Like the Prophet ﷺ says exact opposite of this rhetoric, where he doesn't want to compete with the other Anbiya. He's not trying to do that. That's why one day he came out and there were Sahaba, they were discussing who's better, the Yunus alayhi salam or the Prophet sallam. Why would they be discussing it? Because Yunus alayhi salam in the Quran is a Rasul who is chastised for leaving his people and abandoning his people before Allah told him to do hijrah. So he did hijrah before the command of hijrah came. Yunus alayhi salam, Jonah. And so the Prophet came out, he overheard this and he says, nobody should say that I am better than Yunus ibn Matta. No one should say that. He's trying to get rid of this like in prophetic, who's better prophet, right? To be honest, the Quran is doing the same thing. The Quran also explicitly mentions to not compare prophets. Tells us explicitly not to do this. I know we do this culturally, but the Quran is explicitly telling us that لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. There is no differentiation. And people say, oh, that means there's no fadila difference. It's not talking that. Just regular Arabic. The prophets are all on one side. You don't say, oh, he was a little bit higher than the other prophet. The Quran is trying to get us to get away from that thinking. Anyways. Innaka antal wahhab. So, by the way, what does that tell us about responsibility? Every single one of us here should feel an immense burden. We should. We should feel this. This is prophetic to feel responsibility for your family, for your classmates, for your neighbors, for everyone around you. You have to see yourself as being a hero in everyone else's life. That's how these people felt, by the way. You have to do this. This is prophetic to feel that way. That I am the shining light. I am the beacon. I am the candle in everyone around me in their lives. So am I burning bright enough? And it's a very important question we have to all ask ourselves, especially if you start looking at the Quran from a da'wah perspective, you have to embody the prophetic character. These are the da'is of the Quran. These are all the da'is of the Quran. Sulaiman is a da'i. And what does he feel? He doesn't feel like he's doing enough. He feels like he's not sufficient enough. By the way, did the Prophet feel similar things? Did he feel like he wasn't doing enough for the da'wah? Yeah, he did. So if these people are feeling that they're not doing enough, and they're doing everything that they could possibly do, there has to be a level of responsibility that all of us should feel. And I guarantee you guys, once you start feeling that responsibility, your tiredness levels will go down. I'm telling you this. That you physically might be tired, but from a spirit perspective, you'll have a lot of energy towards doing good. Right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the jinns and the winds under his care. Right? From a literature perspective, just purely literature, what does the story tell us? The story tells us something really powerful. You know what it tells us? It tells us that every single moment or every single narrative that we have in our lives, we can turn it into something that can lead to khair. Good things are not bad. How you interpret good things is bad though. So if you have blessings, like if you have wealth, if you have a really nice car, just like Sulaiman had these beautiful horses, does that car have a potential to leading you back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes. Is there anything wrong with having good things? No. But how are you going to interpret all the goods in your life? Are you going to do what Sulaiman did, which is to take these goods and take them to Allah? You guys know how powerful this is in da'wah, to telling people that you're not supposed to have a lot, but what you do have, you're supposed to be you're supposed to take them as precious. How many people are hungry to hear the power of ni'am, like blessings and gratitude? One of the best things you can teach someone in da'wah is that the Qur'an is a book of gratitude. It shows you how to be grateful. And if you have gratitude in your life, there's like self-help industry en masse talks a lot about gratitude, like a lot. And one of the most basic things in the Quran is that it begins with gratitude. Like the first thing in the Quran is gratitude. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The first things that people, when they're entering into Jannah, you know what they're saying? They're saying Alhamdulillah. From the first things, right? وَآخِرُ الدَّعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. So the Quran begins with gratitude. Our messenger's name is Muhammad, right? Which is coming from Ha, Mim, and Dal. Its root letters are about gratitude. It's about praise and gratitude. So just imbibing this in da'wah is very important. And then communicating gratitude to people is really important. The next I wanted to look at very quickly, because actually I want to show you some comparisons. As literature, just recently taught this, and I was going through this and I realized, oh my God, this is perhaps one of the most, this is 4 verses, yes? 5 verses. 5 verses. It is so packed with lessons, unbelievable. And by the way, this doesn't exist anywhere else in the Quran. Like this story of Cain and Abel, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the Quran. It's just here in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 27 to 31. Nowhere else does this story exist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about something that is so primordial, it is so relevant to you and me, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. He tells us, وَاتْلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ ابْنَيْ Adam. Ya Rasulullah, tell people about the story of the 2 sons of Adam. Okay, from what we studied about stories, you think this is a history lesson? Allah's telling us what happened with the 2 children of Adam, so we sort of can answer an Islamic trivia one day, right? No, it has nothing to do with this. This is packed, word by word, with so many layers of meanings that are there so that we archetypically take on these personas of the 2 children of Adam. He says about them, إِذْ قَرَّبَا قُرْبَانًا, when both of them offered a sacrifice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what's a sacrifice? What is a sacrifice? When someone offers a sacrifice, when they sacrifice for something, what does it mean? Yes?
To give the best of what you have.
Okay, so give something that's valuable to you. Okay? If you give something you never use and you will never use, it's not really a sacrifice, right? That's just you cleaning up, decluttering. Not a sacrifice. Sacrifice is you take something, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. The Qur'an says you don't truly become righteous until you give from what you love. Something precious to you. Okay, number one. First pillar of sacrifice is you give out something precious. What else? Yes. Okay. So you have to give it for the sake of Allah. You have to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? Like you can't do it as a means of nothing or as a means of showing off. Right? You do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who are you sacrificing for? That's basically it. And the third thing with sacrifice is that embedded in sacrifice is this understanding that I'm giving something up today to receive something up later that is better. So when you sacrifice 8 hours of work, you do it for the paycheck that comes at the end of the day, at the end of the month, right? When you sacrifice because you go to a long journey, you only do it because it's worth it. Your destination is worth the journey. You've calculated this. We all do this all the time. Well, if I take this bus and there's 2.5 hours, is it really worth me going there? And we're like, it's not worth it. So you don't do it. So you don't sacrifice those 2.5 hours on transit because it's not worth it. All of us are doing this calculation all the time. So for them to put a sacrifice in is got those three conditions. Everyone understand that? It has to be something precious. It has to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it has to be something that they are expecting greater reward in the end. Okay, so what happens? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about this sacrifice, فَتُقُبِّلَ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَلَمْ يُتَقَبَّلْ مِنَ الْآخَرِ. This sacrifice is accepted from one of the brothers. It's not accepted from the other. Okay, so is this a common phenomenon? That someone has put a lot of time, effort into something. Let's say 4 years of an undergraduate degree. Yes? And by the time they're 22, 23, and they're applying in the job market, no takers. No interview. Is this a common phenomenon? Or am I making this up? This is very common. Okay? Someone did everything right in their 20s. And now they're at the end of their 20s, they're not able to get married. They did everything right. No major sins, got good grades, studied really hard, hung around with the right people. Is this a phenomenon? Can this happen to somebody? Absolutely. Is this all around us, you guys? You can take this in any set. So I'm trying to tell you that this is not a story like a history story about two sons of Adam. This is about you and me. In a lot of things, we've done all the right things and something horrible happens. Something that we didn't intend. So what do we feel happens to our sacrifice? It wasn't accepted. It didn't bear fruit. It didn't give us any results. It was just sacrifice. And now it's my time. You know, I spent 4 years in the university. I worked really, really hard. I studied. I paid all this money. Now it's my time to make money. Yes? That's the deal, isn't it? I've done my part. And then if Qadr doesn't show you its part, what happens? What happens is this. It's exactly what happens. This is what happens in the story. So what happens is the guy says, قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ. I'm going to kill you. Now tell me, pause for a second. If his sacrifice is not accepted and his brother's sacrifice is accepted, whose fault is it? You can be wrong. His fault. How is it his brother's fault that his sacrifice is not accepted? This is crazy. But he says, I'm going to kill you to his brother. And you might think it's crazy, but it's not. That's exactly what all of us do as well. When you look at someone who did similar sacrifices as you, yet their life is going in a very good direction, and perhaps your life is going very slowly or not going at all, the first impulse of the human being is to say, that's wrong. And jealousy kicks in. This is the satanic sin. Right? Iblis had the same thing. خَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ وَخَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ. You created me from fire. You created him from dirt. I'm better than him. And he becomes vengeful. Right? Actually, this story is the Iblis story, correct? Is it not? Isn't he envious of Adam? And he decides, I'm going to spend my entire existence deluding his children out of envy. Do you guys know that all of those people who sort of shoot up schools, some of them write manifestos, yes? Those mass shooters. You know what it's, so tell me, the kids that they kill, are they at any fault? That's them, the mass shooters basically, taking their fist and pumping it at God. Saying, my life is miserable, and I try to do the right thing, and look where I ended up. Nothing's working in my favor. So I'm going to arbitrarily take away something from you that's precious to you. And what's most precious psychologically? What's more precious? Children are sinless. So you see, that's not crazy, is it? Is this some history story now? Is this rooted in history? I'm asking you guys, is this a history story anymore? I'm telling you, all manifestos of all these mass shooters say this very same thing. So is this relevant? Or is this like about the two sons of Adam? No, it's about every mass shooter, because that's what they conclude. Instead of saying, my sacrifices were not accepted, I need to figure out, what did I do wrong? Did I sacrifice that which was precious? What are the three pillars of sacrifice again? For a Qurban, what are the three pillars? Something based on value, something for the sake of Allah. Right, so what did they focus, which pillar do they focus on? They focus on the third pillar. Like, I did all of these things, where's my return? My life isn't going too well, so can you go on war with God? Is that possible for a human being, that I'm going to go on war with God? No. What do you end up going on war with the people of God? You can't take God down, right? So that's exactly what he does. لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, I'm going to kill you. Yeah? And what does his brother say? قَالَ إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. He tells him, your problem is not me, man. He tells him, I'm not the issue. Allah only accepts from the people of taqwa. Your issue is, like, you need to move your taqwa counter higher. Your problem is not me. Your problem is you. Right? This is a very difficult lesson for people to learn. That life sometimes doesn't go your way because Allah's trying to teach you something. It's nobody's fault. Because what happens in our lives when things aren't going well? Oh my God, I do marriage counseling. And one of the things that happens in marriage all the time is that instead of looking at the reality of why things aren't working out, people just want to blame someone, right? So he says, like, his fault, or it's her fault, it's his mother's fault, it's his sister's fault, right? It's her best friend, she's the problem. No, it's his cousin, he's the issue. It's this job. Before he took this job, he was a normal person, right? Oh, it's after we had children, that's when everything fell apart. Have you heard this? This is the major tropes. Because why? People want to find something to blame. That's what we're learning in this. He thinks his brother is the problem. On what grounds? His sacrifice is not accepted. It has nothing to do with his brother. All of those mass shooters, why are they killing up those kids? Is it their fault that their life didn't turn out? Has nothing to do. It's completely irrelevant, unrelated, right? Because the rule is Allah accepts sacrifices for the people of taqwa, right? That's the rule. That's what's being taught, right? Anyways, so finally, the last stretch, which will give you like a little bit appetizers for everything, okay? Don't have enough time, but that's okay. Khair, inshallah. Last thing, the Quran is a corrective to biblical narratives. This is really important, especially when you're speaking to someone from the Christian, Jewish faith. It's very important for them that you tell them that although you love Musa and Isa alayhimus salam, you love revelation, the Quran has a particular stance on their tradition. If you can show someone this, I'll give you a personal example. There's a police officer who served for 22 years. Okay, he said he'd seen things. So we're on a walk one day. He's a neighbor to one of my uncles. And he was very curious about Islam because he's very plugged into the YouTube Islam Christian refutation stuff. He's very linked to his church. So he had all these random facts that he picked up on these like anti-Islam Christian videos that he was just like, would just say to me randomly, right? He would say, okay, what about the age of Aisha? And I was like, what about it? And then we'd have like a 3-hour discussion, right? And then one day we'd meet up. It's like, well, what about the satanic verses, right? He'd do one of these. He's a troll, right? He's a nice guy, very sincere. But he's an internet troll, basically, right? And one day I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this now. I'm going to do this. I said, what about this? And what about that? See how it feels? And I actually have answers for your questions. You have no answers for this. The thing the Quran says, my mom, when I was in my study days, my mom said we should never open doors for those, those people who ring the bell and they want to talk to you about Christ, right? Because she was like, oh, because it would take hours at our house because we'd invite them in and feed them, And then I'd be like, yeah, let's talk about the gospel. So what's going on here, right? There's one sweet little kid. He was like maybe 17, 18. He says, yeah, I don't know anything you're talking about, but I'm going to bring my priest next Sunday, right? It was Sunday evening, and then we'll talk about this. So next week he brings his priest, and my mom's a witness to this. After an hour, he goes, yeah, I'm going to bring my teacher, right? Because they don't know what you're talking about. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is 548, okay? And that's why, by the way, for us living in the West, and that's why even some of you are in the ABC tract, in the ABC, there's a whole course on biblical study. So close to about 3-4 months, we study close to about 23 books so that we understand how their religion works, how does it function, how do we interact with an educated, very intellectual Christian or Jewish person, how do we navigate through these things? It's really important because this is a main theme in the Quran. Like the Quran wants us to be semi-theologically adept with Christian and Jewish theology. I'm not making this up. Like if you go through the entire Quran, the Quran is giving us tools how to converse with the Jewish and the Christian communities, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the Quran that it's muhaiminan alayhi. The Quran is a muhaimin over the Jewish and the Christian text. So I'll just give you 3 quick examples and we'll move forward inshallah because my time is about to be finished. One is Adam and Hawa, which is very common. The other one is the crucifixion. And the third one is a couple of things from Yusuf alayhi salam's life. I'm just choosing these examples because, of course, I told you the theme of today's discussion is going to be da'wah through stories. And these are all stories. Okay? So, Adam and Hawa. Let's read the Genesis chapter 3. Okay? Genesis chapter 3, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. Right? He said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? So according to the Bible, the snake is supposed to be the manifestation of the devil, and the snake converses with who? With Eve only. Okay? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. Right? Which is basically don't go close to it. That's the idea. Don't touch it. See, eating it is different. Don't even touch it. Like, don't even get close to it. Which is what the Quran says. La taqraba hadihi shajara. Okay. It says, you will not certainly die, the serpent said. The serpent saying, God's lying to you. The first thing he says, like, you're not going to die. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. Okay, so by the way, I want you to remember, does the Quran give a reasoning to Adam and Hawa for not eating from the tree? Or does the Quran just say don't eat from the tree? It just says don't eat from the tree. Yes, interestingly. So, you know, there's some people who say the Quran copied the Bible. But how come the Quran doesn't copy its mistakes? This is a mute point. A lot of people say, oh, the Quran is an adaptation of the Bible. It's like, how is this? You know, what would you call an adaptation in which you get rid of all of the falsities? What would you call that? An edit. You'd call that an editor's cut. You would call that a correction. We don't have a problem saying that. The Quran is the adapted, correct version of the Bible. There's no problem. Anyone can say this. Okay? So, and you must not touch it or you will die. Again, this is in the Bible. As you will see, the Quran doesn't have this detail. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So you'll have the shu'ur of haqq and batil, right? Of khayr and shar. So this is the tree of consciousness, according to the Bible. Then it says, when the woman saw, let me just get rid of this. Unfortunately, I don't have the Genesis memorized. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eyes, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So who fed Adam the forbidden fruit? Who fed Adam? She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Eve. So who's the source of disobedience according to the Bible? Women. right? Okay, let's look at the Quranic narrative. I told you the whole point of this is that Quran is doing a corrective, right? So, yes. Yes. There are two narratives in the Old Testament on the Adamic story. Both of them put Eve as the culprit for eating from the tree. Both narratives do that. So it's called Adam A, Adam B in the biblical tropes, in the biblical narratives, but both of them put Eve as the one who's evil. Yes, it's 5. It's Genesis 5. So you should be able to find that there. Okay. فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ. The Quran's version of this. Okay. Question, yes.
I just wanted to ask, you started reading this, you said that Allah said, so when we refer to Bible verses, are we supposed to say in that sense, like God said, this
No. No, I misspoke. Yeah. It's not God said this. Yeah. We shouldn't even do this with Hadith Qudsi. The correct position, I shouldn't say correct, the more careful position when narrating Hadith Qudsi is you say, أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like Allah said like this. You don't say God said this because it's not tawatur. So only for the Quran can we say Allah says. Okay? We can't even say this for Hadith Qudsi. So what about the Bible then? Right? فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَ الشَّيْطَانُ. Shaitan whispered to both of them. Quran, at the beginning of the story of the waswasa, includes Adam and Hawa into its statements. It doesn't make it a female-only conspiracy that she got whispered by the serpent, and then later she convinced her husband. This is not what happens in the Quran. Interestingly enough, in tafsir, you find this exact passage quoted in classical tafsir. The way they explain it is that Eve was at fault. Classical Muslim tafsirs does this too. Right? Because again, why? Because it's heavily influenced by biblical tropes. That's why. Yes. So biblical scholars, you can look at Pregu's book on this, on symbols of Christ, that he actually says that the serpent, the devil took the serpent's form, right? Because the devil was prohibited from coming to, because he didn't prostrate to Adam. So he was prohibited, remember? He was prohibited from coming to, so he therefore takes the form of a serpent and comes. They're trying to solve a problem, and that problem is, how did the devil have access to Jannah after he's been kicked out for not prostrating? That's what they're trying to solve. So they solve it through the serpent, right? Muslim scholars solve it too, but they don't solve it through the serpent. The serpent narrative is not in classical tafsir. It's not in the Quran either, okay? Because we have a different way of solving it. What is it? According to Muslim scholars, when he's banished, he's not banished permanently, right? He's not banished permanently, right? So, لِيُبْدِيَ لَهُمَا, because the Quran is very clear that it's the devil who did this. And it's also very clear that he's kicked out from that point onwards, right? So what does he want? لِيُبْدِيَ لَهُمَا مَا وُرِيَ عَنْهُمَا مِنْ سَوْآتِهِمَا. According to the Quran, the devil wanted to expose the nakedness of Adam and Hawa, meaning sort of point them towards shamelessness. Yes? وَقَالَ مَا نَهَكُمَا رَبُّكُمَا عَنْ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. So he's a rational, the devil. He says, why did Allah stop you from eating from the tree? So he's like probing, it's like, why? Right? إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ مَلَكَيْنِ. He's like, I'll tell you the reason. Now, what happened here? Who says the reason? Who says the reason? You must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. Who's saying this? Eve is saying this, correct? Over here, who tells the reason that you'll turn into angels? That if you eat from the tree, you'll turn into angels. The devil is. It's not coming from Eve. It's not coming from Allah. The trickery is not coming. Over here, it's as if God has lied to Eve. Do you understand? Because God told Eve, if you touch the tree, you'll die. Don't go near it. It's like what you tell little children. It's like, this is really important. If you go near, you'll get hurt. But in reality, they won't get hurt. This is lying. Right? That's what this is saying. Over here, it's the devil saying this. You'll turn into angels. أَوْ تَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَالِدِينَ. Or you'll be those who live eternally. Right? وَقَاسَمَهُمَا إِنِّي لَكُمَا لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. And he swore to both of them that most definitely I am a sincere person to you. Right? فَدَلَّاهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. Then the Qur'an says, بِغُرُور. The Qur'an says, and it took a long time to deceive them. It took a long time. Like there were a lot of khutuwat. There were a lot of steps that he used to get them. Here, this narrative says that he went and just ate from the tree. It's like, oh, God lied to us? Let's just eat from this tree. It was so good. Over here it says the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye. It's like, this disobedience is great, right? Over here, no, they didn't listen to him. You see how Allah preserves the honor of Adam and Hawa? They're not listening to him. So he's added. He says, فَدَلَّاهُمَا. Yeah? He roped them in slowly and slowly. Because when you put a bucket into the well, can you just like smash it open? Can you pull it, tug it through? Now, what do you have to do? You have to slowly rope it through, right? فَدَلَّاهُمَا. Just like you do to a bucket. He's slowly bringing him closer to his motif, right? Through deception. فَلَمَّا ذَاقَ الشَّجَرَةَ. And when they ate from the tree, what happened here when they ate from the tree? This is great, right? This is what happened here. What happens when they ate from the tree? بَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا. Their nakedness, they were aware of their nakedness. وَطَفِقَ يَخْصِفَانِ عَلَيْهِمَا مِنْ وَرَقِ الْجَنَّةِ. They covered themselves up, right? And when they seek for forgiveness, what happens? قَالَ رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. Both of them said, we have wronged ourselves. So I want you to compare this to this. Who did he whisper to? الشَّيْطَانُ وَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا. He whispered to both of them. Who sought forgiveness? قَالَ رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. We seek forgiveness. What does that mean? In no place in the entire narrative of the Qur'an is it only mention Eve or Adam. It puts them together. This is what's called a Quranic corrective. It's correcting this narratives. Like this is not true. Some of these details are misleading. The conclusion you will draw from this is wrong. And this is why many early Christian thinkers, Justin Martyr from amongst them, Irenaeus from amongst them, early church fathers, the entire church, the Catholic Church is built on these figures. They believed women to be a tool for the devil because of this paradigm. Explicit statements from them, from this paradigm. Because this is obvious. This is the natural conclusion of this passage, right? Okay, I need everyone to do me a favor. I need you to go to 4157 in Qur'an.com. So go to Qur'an.com/4/157. It doesn't matter whose translation you're reading. And read that translation. Yes, go ahead, Murad. Any translation.
Said in boast, who killed Christ, Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of Allah. They killed him not, nor crucified him. So it was made to appear to them. And those who differ therein are full of doubts, with no certain knowledge, but only conjecture to follow, for of a surety they killed him not.
I haven't used chalkboard in such a long time. So that's what I want you to focus on. Every translation will say the same thing. It will say, they boasted that we killed Christ, or they claimed, they proclaimed. Multiple translations will say different things, but this is the same thing. قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ, we killed the Christ. And it will also say, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ, and they didn't kill him, neither crucified him. وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ. Every translation will say this, because that's what it says in Arabic. What's wrong with this? They didn't kill him, neither crucified him. What's wrong with that? There's something wrong with that. Yes. Very good. It's not clear as to what happened. But just look at this. Just forget everything else that you know about the story. As if you don't even know if this is about Jesus. Just read this. They didn't kill him, neither crucified him. Yeah?
Is this implying that crucifying and killing him are two different things?
Yeah. There's a problem, isn't it? Because if you crucify someone, haven't you killed them? Shouldn't it be, and they didn't kill him through crucifixion? That's normal speech, right? So, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ بِالصَّلْبِيَّةِ. They didn't kill him through crucifixion. Or it should have just said they didn't crucify him, which would already mean they didn't kill him through crucifixion. Why split this up? They didn't kill him, neither crucified him. I'm telling you, the Quran is, when it's doing this, we're supposed to pay attention, like, hold on a second. The Quran is talking to something. It's clearing something up. Otherwise, even if you say both can be mentioned, then it should be they didn't crucify him and they didn't kill him, because crucifixion will happen first and killing will happen second, correct? What's the right order when someone dies after they're being crucified? You crucify them, and then they eventually pass away from the loss of blood. But this order is different. It's like they didn't kill him, they didn't crucify him. Of course, traditional tafsir would not look at this, because for them, this would not be a problem. Okay? But let's see this, in my view, and the view of many scholars, it's responding to something. What is it responding to? So in the Talmud, we read Sanhedrin, which is like kitab or bab, 43a 20, right? It's a particular pashita, like it's a fatwa. So we're reading a fatwa now in the Talmud. An average Orthodox Jew reads more Talmud than they do Torah, right? Because Talmud is prescriptive law and Torah is descriptive law. Torah is generalities, it's not fatwas. The Talmud is fatwas, more relevant, right? You know how like you have Qur'an readings? Or in Orthodox Judaism, you have Talmud readings, not Torah readings. The Torah is for ulama. The Talmud is for people, okay? So the Mishnah teaches, which is the oral tradition, that a crier goes out before the condemned man. So we're going to condemn him for a crime. Okay? We're condemning him for a crime. The fatwa is saying, so this is Jewish fiqh. This indicates that it is only before him, i.e., while he is being led to his execution, that yes, the crier goes out. But from the outside, before the accused is convicted, he does not go out. So before the court gives the ruling that he is going to be crucified, no one is allowed to go tell anyone that there's going to be a public crucifixion. Why? Because innocent until proven guilty. That's the fatwa. Until the court says he's going to be crucified, no, it's haram for anyone to go out and tell people, hey, such and such guy is being crucified. Come, let's watch. You can't do that. Crier is the person who's going to announce that someone's about to get crucified. Okay? It says, the Gemara raises a difficulty. The Gemara is the commentary of the Mishnah. It says it raises a difficulty. But isn't it taught in a Baraita, in a hadith, Baraita is their hadith, on Passover Eve, they hung the corpse of Jesus the Nazarene after they killed him by the way of stoning. So isn't it a problem that when Jesus was killed and a crier went out before him for 40 days, publicly proclaiming Jesus the Nazarene is going to be stoned because he practiced sorcery, incited people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray? An average Orthodox Jew today reads this because this is in Talmud. Right? So someone is saying, look, if the official law is that a crier has to go out after the person is being led to execution, why in Jesus' case, the crier went out 40 days before Jesus was executed? I was telling everyone, hey, Jesus the Nazarene is going to get executed. You guys should come and watch. How is this possible? Isn't that a contradiction in the law? So the response is, anyone who knows of a reason to acquit him should come forward and teach it on his behalf. And the court did not find a reason to acquit him, and so they stoned him and hung his corpse on Passover. So read this last part. According to Jews, what happened to Jesus? They stoned him to death and hung his corpse, the dead body, on the Passover. What does that say? They didn't kill him, neither crucified him. What is that responding to? It's responding to a text that is read today by Orthodox Jews all over the place. The Qur'an is saying, it's repudiating this. Therefore, the they there is not about Jesus' crucifixion, it's about the Jews. They, as in the Jews, didn't kill him. So they stoned him to death. Allah saying lies, didn't happen. This is a lie. And neither crucified it. See, crucifixion happens after. And hung his corpse on Passover. That happens after. So the order of the Quran now is telling you that it's actually a corrective of that Talmudic passage. Right? And that's the verse here. So you can clearly see, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ comes first, وَمَا صَلَبُهُ comes after. Peter Schaeffer, in Jesus and the Talmud, you can read this yourself, says the Talmud reimagines the Gospels and asserts that Jesus was rightfully and lawfully executed according to Jewish law. See, Peter Schaeffer is one of the scholars of the Old Testament. He says what the Old Testament is doing here in the Talmud is that it reimagines the gospel narrative of Jesus dying and makes it so that Jesus was killed by them. For what? Practicing sorcery. What does the Quran say? When Allah sent Isa alayhi salam to the Bani Israel, he said, Ya Bani Israel, inni Rasulullahi ilaykum, right? And then he gives him the good news and everything. What did he say? فَلَمَّا جَاءَ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. When he came with clear proofs, what did they do? They rejected him and said, سِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ. هذا سِحْرٌ مُبِينٌ. This is clear sorcery. You see what the Quran is doing? It's quoting these things in the Quran to refute this understanding. Yes? Did everyone understand that? It's no longer a conundrum, right? Why is they didn't kill him, neither crucified him? This is solved because you have to look at the Quran as a response to previous biblical narratives. Does it make sense to everybody? Okay. And lastly, Yusuf alayhi salam. And I wanted to end on a lighter note because some of this stuff was heavier. So Yusuf alayhi salam, this is in the Gospels. Okay, so you'd find this in Genesis. And he dreamed yet another dream and told his brethren and said, hold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. This is prostration. Is this what the Quran says? What's happening here in this? Yusuf is telling his brothers, I've had that dream again, by the way, where the sun and the moon and the stars are prostrating to me. Is that the Quranic narrative? Do you recognize this from the Quran? What's the story that you recognize? What happens in the Quran here? Yes. He told his father. Did he tell his brothers? By the way, what does his father tell him?
Tells them, don't tell your brother.
He tells him, don't tell your brother. Right? Whereas, so you know what the Quranic passage is doing? It's correcting this. Because in this story, it seems that he's been going around telling his brothers, by the way, you're supposed to make sajda to me one day. Right? Why would a prophet do that? Why would a kid do that who's righteous? Okay, his father rebuked him. So in the Bible, Jacob rebukes Joseph and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? What kind of weird dreams are you having? Right? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee on earth? Jacob is saying, do you think we're going to bow down to you on earth? You think this was going to happen? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the same. His brother envied him, but his father took note of what happened in the dream. Do you think this is what happens in the Quran? Is this how Yaqub responds to hearing the dream? No. What happens in the Quran? He said, oh my darling son, relate not thy dream to thy brothers. So it's the opposite of this. Okay? Lest they contrive a plot against thee, for Satan to man is an open enemy. And then what happens for this? How does his father respond to Yusuf seeing a dream? Yeah, وَكَذَلِكَ يَجْتَبِيكَ. He says, you are the chosen one. It's so different from this. It's the opposite. Over here, Jacob is saying, how dare you dream these weird dreams? Right? And over here, he's saying, you're the chosen one. You're going to be the next in line for prophets after Abraham and Isaac and me. You're next. Isn't this like a world of a difference? This is what we mean by Quranic correctives. And that's why a lot of people who come to Islam through Christianity, they actually come to Islam through these type of things. Because they look at this and like, this is way more logical. It allows me to revere these people. It shows me that these people were the people of God, right? Sorry, there's a hand there somewhere. Yes. They didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. It's good detail. Good catch. Okay. So unfortunately, I actually don't have a lot of time for QA because that I go. We have another class to administer soon. But if there are any questions that are burning, you can ask. Okay, without feeling any guilt. I will stop here. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Just 3 takeaway points for everybody here. The Quran is meant to be the ultimate da'wah manual. If you remember from the beginning of my talk, what are the 2 things you need for da'wah? What are the 2 things you need to call believers and non-believers alike to Islam? What are those 2 things? Character and Quran. You just need 2 things, character and Quran. You don't need a 3rd thing. Trust me. You can attend as many da'wah circles as you want, as many workshops, And the content that you need is the content of your character and the content of Allah's book. فَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ. The Quran is telling us to remind other people through the Quran. Yes, there's nothing more powerful than the Quran itself to reinvigorate and resuscitate someone's fitrah. Nothing else. Everything else secondary. Any tool that you learn, any other logical arguments, rational arguments, teleological arguments, cosmological arguments, you can learn all that stuff. It's great. I'm not stopping you from learning that. That's not why people convert to Islam. They convert to Islam because your character and because you made them fall in love with Allah and His Messenger through the Quran. That's why they convert. Ask people who convert. They don't convert because they finally understood the cosmological argument. Show me these people. Where are they? They only exist in dawah slides. This caricature of a person who accepted Islam because they were rationally defeated only exists in dawah slides or in Dr. Zakir Naik videos. Okay? In reality, what are people touched by? People are touched by a character and by the Quran, and that's the sunnah of doing da'wah. That's how the Prophet did da'wah. And if there's anything you need in da'wah, is what did I tell you? Every da'wah program, if you go there, what should they teach you? Grammar, rhetoric, logic, speaking. They should teach you how to speak well. Because when you're talking to someone and you're able to take an idea that's inside your head and put it inside their head without any loss in transmission, 90% of your work is done. This is why there's no prophet who's ever walked the earth who wasn't eloquent in their speech. That's what a da'i is supposed to be. So if you ever have like a dawah program that I would love to support, is where the da'is teach people how to construct their language properly, how to use which word where, how to penetrate an idea from their head into the other head without any loss in communication and transmission, right? That's the actual thing we all need to get better at, especially with the English language, because most likely when we're speaking to other people, we'll be using the English medium. Right? So if you have those three things, right? You have character, Quran, and communication. Now you have the prerequisites to be a da'i. And now it's about learning and experience. The more you do it, the better you get at it, inshallah. It's like a skill. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the Quran the spring of our hearts, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the lens by which we view the world. I'm very, very happy to see all of you here in these things and middle of the week, especially on a weekday. Mondays are Muslims love Mondays because the Prophet was born on a Monday. And it's a day where our deeds are taken to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, attitude-wise, no one should have like this Mondays are tough type of attitude, okay? No, Monday is the beginning of the week for us, especially if you observe weekends. And it's the day that the Prophet was born. It's a day of celebration, right? And inshallah ta'ala, I'm requesting everyone to make sure that what the MSA should do, and alhamdulillah, your MSA is really good at this. Whenever you're learning something, try your best to bring one person who if you don't bring them, they won't come. If you can do that to every event, just this is your goal. It doesn't have to be academic stuff, even non-academic things, you guys, where there's a bunch of righteous people gathering, your goal should be each one take one. That's your goal. That's your mantra. Every single person here brings someone who, if you didn't bring them, they wouldn't have came. And if you do that, you're going to be doing the biggest service to the MSA. Why? Because it helps them market. The MSA should not be marketing events, to be honest. The MSA should be focused on delivering quality things. We are supposed to bring people to this. We're supposed to be marketing Islam on campus, not the MSA. MSA is supposed to serve us. They shouldn't do all this other stuff. They should just bring the right people here. They're not doing a good job of that today, but they should. They should bring right people here, and your job is to make sure you find someone and you bring them here, right? And if you do that, inshallah ta'ala, every little thing that everyone learns, it goes into your khair, right? It's a good strategy. So each one, bring one. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.